Hi, my name is Danny Gill, and I am here today with Cuba Fox from New Island. We are talking about some New Island titles today with Live Network. So, three great books today, Cuba, to chat through.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a million, Danny. We're really glad. The three books I'm going to talk about, they're all from this year, 2022. And the first one I'd like to talk about is actually one that's very close to our hearts. It's Legends. And this is part of the Open Door series, which is a long running initiative that New Island set up back in the 90s. So before my time, but Patricia Scanlan was involved with that since the beginning. She's our series editor. And it's something we're really passionate about because it's geared towards emergent readers. So that might be adult readers who might be new, learning for the first time to read. They might be returning. They might have not had a good experience. Maybe they're coming back around. And what's really nice about the Open Door series is, I'll just give you a bit of a quick introduction and then I'll chat a little bit about Legends more specifically. But it's kind of trying to create adult appropriate content. So when Patricia was working in Ballymun Library years ago, she was finding adult lenders were coming up. They had to borrow, Anne and Sam go to the shops, children's books, which just wasn't appropriate and was quite embarrassing for them and also not very interesting. We love reading, obviously, here in New Island, and we want everyone to get that experience. So that's kind of the ethos of Open Door is to create books that you'd be proud to read on the bus, is kind of the idea behind it. So they've been going for years. If people are familiar with them, they're quite small, thin, very accessible, but up until now they've all been novellas. So all fiction, the likes of John Boyne, Marion Keyes, loads of big names have contributed to Open Door. But where Legends comes in and is quite different is it's our first non-fiction title. So we were thinking about readers and who we might get, who maybe hasn't engaged with Open Door, because as much as we might all love fiction and novellas and other short fiction forms, there's a whole other readership out there who aren't interested in that. So we thought we'd look at who we haven't engaged with really with Open Door yet. And that's where Legends, we ended up looking at a whole series of sporting memoirs, biographies, that kind of thing. We took extracts from 15 well-known Irish sporting personalities, male and female. We've got Keith Earls, Katie Taylor, some older ones as well, like Ronnie Delaney, who's a running star. And we extracted them out, working with Patricia and with Nala as well, who've become a big partner. We edited them down to plain English.
Okay, yeah.
And the plain English is a lot of it, there might be very big changes, but it's just shortening the sentences, maybe dropping any complex words or kind of phrases. And it's been brilliant. So that went out on the 8th of September. We did a big launch in Aviva or Lansdowne, and there was loads of readers there getting their prizes and for their year's work, and the book was launched. So
brilliant. It's great. And I think it's brilliant, the Open Door series, because aside from people who might be new to reading altogether, I think people often say to me, I haven't picked up a book in a long time, or I haven't, sometimes there are barriers, perceived barriers as well, like with books and certain titles that people do feel like are beyond them. And it's great to see something that has so many interesting stories of like a lot of well-known sports heroes in there that are very likable and are known to everyone. And it's a great book.
Yeah. And one of the things we're finding too, like you're saying, that kind of returning to reading post-COVID, a lot of people's attention spans are gone. So like I love the Open Door because they're just very easy to read. We did in 2020 we did Voices, which was a slightly new departure, as well as the Legends. Like it was an anthology of short stories, but they're all brilliant. Like Graham Norton wrote an original piece for it. They're all very funny, very accessible. So it's not just about adult like learners either. I think it's for everyone. And like one of the kind of key stats that Nala had shared with us, was 1 in 6 Irish adults have difficulty reading everyday text, like a bus timetable. So it's not a small portion of people. So our hope really is that, you know, if you've someone in your family or you yourself are kind of struggling with reading, that there's texts there that are appropriate, interesting, they have familiar names of authors and subjects, and you can just get stuck into it.
Yeah, brilliant, great stuff, Cueva. So the next one is Three Castles Burning. People might be familiar with the podcast, Donald's podcast, Donald Fallon, Three Castles Burning. So this is a publication that has come out of that.
Yeah, exactly. This is it here. A lot of people might have seen this in the shops. It's been flying off, which is great. You know, one of the great things about Donald is he's a young historian. He's younger than I am. I won't reveal how old I am or how old he is, but he's fantastic. He's so well read, but he's also really passionate. So I think when you have an author who really loves what they're writing about, it comes out. And what he's done with this is very clever. If anyone's familiar with the podcast, he tends to pick one street or one location, and he'll really hone in and get into the kind of, you know, the social history, where the name came from. Like I was laughing this the other day, Ship Street, you know, up the back of Dublin Castle. That's actually not to do with ships, it's to do with sheep. So it's the like linguistic changes that over the years, but it was there was a little farm there or something. There used to be sheep there.
Okay. Yeah.
So all of those little funny, quirky things, but then also it's that kind of wider understanding. So I think because Donal is he's also does amazing walking tours. He's on those streets, like he really, really knows them. So when you're reading it, that comes across.
It's lovely, that kind of oral history, isn't it? And it's a very different way to kind of get to know places, because like you're saying there about street names, even I live in Galway City, and there are several street names where they literally are called, you know, Flood Street, because it would flood from the nearby water. And then there Sea Road, I only realized like a few years ago that was because like the sea did actually come up that far, like came right up to parts of the city now where, you know, we have like eateries and like houses and roads and things. And there's something about, I guess, a place that is lived in, you know, for many people who would be either living in Dublin, passing through Dublin, walking down these streets. There's a very tangible kind of a living history there that's often kind of missed or overlooked. And I'm guessing that's probably why this podcast has been so popular, and why the book is selling well as well, is that idea of the very small personal details of each of these places and the stories that they reveal. It's kind of a unique way of finding stuff out about the area.
Absolutely. And I mean, Donald himself, he wrote most of that book during lockdown. So, you know, he was out walking the streets, and we all were. So the fact that he was able to do a lot of that thinking and writing when the streets are so quiet, when now that they're full again, you still have that kind of slight pause where you stop and you look up and you see something that you mightn't have looked at before. You just it's a really nice perspective, and kind of captures a moment in time that maybe we want to forget, but also, you know, it's a nice outcome of it.
Yeah. The final title is A Little Unsteadily into Light. This is quite different from both of the titles we've discussed already. It's a new dementia-inspired fiction and comprises of new stories, short stories by a lot of Irish writers. I know recent Post winner Nuala O'Connor is in there, Sinead Gleeson is in there, Elaine Feeney, several well-known Irish authors. But this body of work as well is coming from this place of kind of highlighting the issue of dementia and the experience of it. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the context for how the two editors came into the mix, Jan
Sure.
and Jania.
Yeah. So this is A Little Unsteadily into Light here. I'm showing all our books because we've got great covers, and we like to try and work with illustrators. So I'd have to give a shout out to Luke Bird, who designed Unsteadily, and also I think it was Jack Now McCormick did Three Castles, and I think Jack Smith did Legend. So we've that's a big part of what we do as well as an independent publisher, is just try and work with freelancers and other artists. So yeah, Little Unsteadily Light is gorgeous. It might seem a little grim on the surface, the subject of it, but what Jane and Jan have done together is really amazing. It came out of quite an academic research project, so that was based in Queen's, and Jane is a linguist, an academic linguist, so she loves language in equal measure, but in a slightly different way to how Jan Carson would be playing with it. So they're a really nice team together in how they've approached this. So the key thing they were looking at was how dementia was kind of represented in narrative fiction. So looking at contemporary culture across the board as well, in film, how it's made to seem. And there's a kind of trope sometimes of a doddery old lady, but actually, you know, dementia has hundreds of different forms, physically, mentally, socially, and just trying to express that as a very broad and diverse experience. So they used a lot of the research to inform how they approached the commissioning of the anthology. But all of the writers, the 14 writers, they've all had a personal experience with dementia through family, friends, or some other path. And I think that comes across. But what was surprising, and what I find very surprising, was the humor. A lot of the stories are very funny and very sweet. There's a lot of love there, a lot of familial love, parental love, siblings, you know, how siblings are trying to manage if they might have a parent with a lot of needs. So they've done it beautifully, and Jane has an amazing afterword that comes back to the kind of academic research. And Jan works a lot in the arts community in Belfast with a lot of dementia and active groups. So they've a really nice balancing act on either end of those 14 stories. And all the royalties are actually being donated to Dementia-NI. So it's a real passion project, and quite different, as you say, to the other books.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, the stories are very tender, and like you say, I think with this topic, it is a topic that an awful lot of people will have had an experience with. And while it is obviously distressing for, you know, family and friends to be dealing with, it is also, I think the humor thing that you've mentioned is really important, because a lot of these stories will be very relatable for a lot of people, and they're done very well in a kind of a, I think the taught nature of coming out of research, I guess, is great, because that's informed this kind of structure then of people responding with their personal stories, but within this framework that Jan and Jane have created. I think that brings two different kind of very different levels to the work, because you have something that in some ways kind of guiding the stories out, and then kind of the afterward even tying it back into the research. I guess there's an awful lot of great initiatives that writers are involved in beyond writing work. Like, I'm just thinking about, you know, other writers in recent years who have been campaigning and highlighting things, and it's great to be able to do that in the medium of writing. It lends itself so well to it, and it can just really shine a light on it in a very different way. So great book, amazing title, beautiful title.
Yeah, it's a line from a Samuel Beckett play. Was it Last Trap? Perhaps Last Trap. But I mean, I suppose the thing about it is, like, it is a heavy subject, and it's something that affects a lot of people. So it's a hard, you know, there is humor there, and there's softness and kindness, but there's also honesty and kind of a very authentic look at the reality of living with dementia. So I think having it in a book form is a nice way to access it, because you can just read one story, say, okay, that's enough for today, come back to it. Do you know, if you were in, you know, if someone in your family or you yourself had recently been diagnosed, it's a nice accessible way to just dip your toe in and see that there's hope there. There's hardness, of course, but it doesn't have to be a lonely road.
Yeah, great. So where can people find the titles, Quiba? Online, in bookshops?
Yeah, all our books are available on newisland.ie, but bookshops nationwide, and in the UK and the US. So do shop around. If you don't see it, ask your local bookseller. And more specifically for Legends and the Open Door anthologies, Voices and Legends, you can actually get a free copy of those through nala.ie or through the local libraries. So that's primarily where they're available. They're not, you know, they're for sale, but primarily we're trying to push them so that there's no holding point. There's also this amazing workbook that Nala put together that goes along with the Legends book. So each chapter has a couple of different interactive activities you can do, and you know, they're used in prisons and schools for people learning English for the first time as well. So just to give that a good plug for everyone to get involved with that. And
brilliant. That's really good to know. Great. Okay, brilliant. And I'll put that in the notes as well with this episode. Caoimhe, thank you so much for being part of this, and thank you to New Island for taking part in it.
Yeah, thanks a million for the opportunity. Delighted.
Okay, have a good Christmas.